Scripture to Sermon. This podcast covers a method of Bible study. It requires no knowledge of Accordance Bible software, Hebrew, or Greek. Pastors are required to study the Bible for more than their daily devotions. They also bear the responsibility of feeding their entire flock. That means studying the Bible to prepare a weekly sermon, and in some cases, several weekly sermons. This podcast is for those people, and specifically those who struggle in moving from Scripture to sermon. This is part 1, the first podcast of 2. Today we'll cover the sermon idea through studying the passage. In part 2, we'll look at studying an individual paragraph and building the actual sermon. Over the years, I've found that many people have a very difficult time moving from a passage of Scripture to a sermon. I thought it might be helpful to demonstrate just how to do that, both with a series of short clips and with the help of a decision tree. The clips will show how to use accordance in the process, as well as a few helpful tools and techniques. In the latter, I'll try to be as transparent as possible about what goes on in my head as I'm thinking through the task. A pastor spends his time in the Word, with the congregation, and in prayer. Out of that lifestyle flows an idea for a sermon. In my own case, it's usually a fragment of a verse along with a general idea of a topic. The first thing I recommend we do is to locate the verse by opening Accordance and searching for one of the words in the verse. We then read the verse and immediately establish its literary context, as it's important to understand the verse as part of the larger passage around it. The easiest way is to check outlines in the info pane. However, in this podcast, I'm going to mention an even better resource for pastors, the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible. It's a series of expository outlines that covers the entire Bible in detail. It's ideal for those who find themselves without the time to use the various methods explained in Chapter 5 of Dr. J's Bible Study Methods, focusing on the paragraph. Whichever method we choose, the next step is to read the verse in context. Now, let's look at just this much of the process in Accordance. As I was considering the sermon, I was also thinking about God's changelessness, His immutability, as theologians call it. I also recalled the scripture phrase, no shadow or turning. I think it's in James, but I don't remember where, so I'll have to search for it. We'll pick the most unusual word in the phrase, shadow, and search for the word, like so. Now, there are a lot of hits here, and we could read through each one, but let's use the go-to menu instead to see if there's a hit in James. There it is, so we'll jump right to it. Now we'll read the verse. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Yep, that's the verse I recalled. Since the info pane is already open, it's going to be easy to check the literary context. This header says we're in the section of James addressing joy in the face of trials, which begins with verse 2 and stretches through verse 18. Let's click that header. It will open outline so we can see if we can get a bit more detail. Here's a section all right, but there aren't any subsections under it. If we're going to construct a sermon from an outline, we're going to need one with a lot more detail. First, let's view the entire passage. And since the section begins with James 1:2, we'll change our search to that verse. Now let's see about that outline with more information. Fortunately, I just added the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible to my library yesterday. I was impressed with its detail and faithfulness to the Bible's structure then. Let's see if it's up to the task today. Eventually, we're going to want it to scroll with our Bible, so we'll use Add Parallel to open it. Yes, it has the kind of detail we need. However, it divides James differently. It says this section goes all the way through verse 27 rather than ending at verse 18. Let's untie it scrolling from the rest of these panes and read through the outline. There's our target verse, verse 17. So let's read a bit more. Okay, I'm convinced. This outline makes more sense to me in this case, and it looks more useful. Let's go with it and get rid of the other outline. We'll also adjust the verse search to cover this entire section. Retie the scrolling, and then read the entire section. That will let us see our target verse in context. At this point, it's important we stop and take time to pray and reflect. Specifically, we want to ask ourselves, is the concept we started with central to, supported by, peripheral to, or irrelevant to the passage we just read? Our decision will determine just how we ought to proceed. We must make that decision now before we proceed further. If we decide the topic is central to or supported by the passage, then we're justified in sticking with the original concept and we can proceed to studying the passage. But what if the concept is peripheral or even irrelevant to the passage? Then we've got another decision to make, one that's going to require more prayer and reflection. Should we stick with the topic or the passage? If we decide to stick with the passage and follow it wherever it leads, all is well and good. We'll just move to studying the passage, and we'll adjust the topic to fit it. However, we could decide instead to stick with the topic. In that case, I recommend we study the topic, beginning with a topic search in the Bible, and then researching the topic in our theological tools. Both of these kinds of searches are very easy to do in accordance. We'll just duplicate our Bible tab and search for the topic immutability. That gives us 22 verses as a starting point. As we read through these verses, we can verify the suitability of each by checking the comments in each of the commentaries in the info pane. Accordance's research feature is just as simple to use. I've limited this search to theological resources since immutability is a theological topic. Doing so will give us just the most relevant results. Other topics might be best searched in Bible dictionaries or some other category. We can even search every resource we have. It doesn't take but a few seconds more. The recommended method of working through these search results is to open a resource that looks helpful, then dismiss it when we're done. Reopen the next, or just click More in the results pane to read the paragraph in which the word is found. Either method enables us to move through a lot of resources quickly. We're not going to do a topical study today, though if you'd like to learn more about such studies, let me recommend watching podcast number 122, How to Study a Topic. For this podcast, we're going to stick with the original concept and study the passage. At this point, I recommend letting our brain rest a bit and assembling our resources. No one is an expert on everything. I'm no different. Though I hold a PhD in biblical studies, this passage is in James, and James is not within my field of specialization. That means I go for advice where I'm going to recommend you do, to bestcommentaries.com. There I can find what others recommend as the very best commentaries on each book of the Bible, including James. Once I get my list, I move those commentaries to the very top of my Accordance library, so they will all appear in the info pane. I will also open a few of the very best ones directly from the library, so they will appear in their own zone. That way I can access the browsers and find the introductory material on the book and the section the passage is in. Now, we read those introductions, both to the book and to the section. Both of those tasks will use the commentaries in the Independent Accordance zone. As you can see, I've already opened bestcommentaries.com in my browser. This is its home page. All we have to do now to find the best commentaries on James is to choose the book, here. Each commentary is tagged in one or more categories: pastoral, technical, or devotional. One of the other really nice features on this site is that it indicates which commentaries are available in each of the major Bible software programs. Since we're using Accordance, we'll check this box and notice that all the top commentaries are available on our platform. Now, we'll use this list and duplicate the arrangement in our Accordance library, dragging each commentary into the correct order. The only exception I'm going to make is to keep the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible outlines and commentary at the top, since they're featured in this podcast. Now, I've already rearranged this library in order to save podcast time. And as we can see, the info pane now reflects our new library order. Let's also open a few of these commentaries directly from the library so we can access their table of contents. Doing it this way will open all of these in their own tabs in a single separate zone. We're going to need that space for something else though, so let's eliminate it by dragging all of those tabs into our original zone. The Table of Contents button, which we used to call the browser, is located here. We'll want to use it to navigate to the introduction of our book, which is usually located at the very beginning of that commentary. This is the commentary module of the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible, by the way. Now, the commentary on our section will be located at the beginning of that section, which will be here. We'll then move on to the next commentary on our list and repeat the process. This entire step will give us a bird's eye view of the book and a sense of the complexity of its issues. We're going to need that information in order to decide just how large a section we can reasonably cover in our sermon. Now, it's time for more prayer and reflection. This time it's about the scope of the sermon. Once again, our knowledge of the congregation and its need figures importantly into this decision. The decision's really a sliding scale. The larger the section of material we cover, the shallower our treatment will be. The less we cover, the deeper we can go. In most cases, and for most American audiences, I'd recommend a paragraph. Our task, then, will be to study the paragraph in depth. If you are a pastor or Bible study leader, I hope today's detailed guide will lighten your task and illustrate just how well Accordance can help you move from Scripture to sermon. Remember to tune in for the next episode, Part 2. In it, we'll cover studying the paragraph through building the actual sermon. This has been Dr. J for Accordance Bible Software. Thank you for watching this episode of Lighting the Lamp.